As I look back on the games I've reviewed on this channel, it's apparent to me that more than half have been indie games developed by small development teams. We live in an interesting time period where the barrier for entry in video game production has never been lower, letting more and more small-time game makers have the opportunity to make games that they would have never dreamed of making 20 or 30 years ago. A lot of what makes these indie games fascinating to me is that the people making them are inspired by the same sort of JRPGs that I was when I was growing up. It's intriguing to see how they use the inspiration from childhood classics to shape their vision of what a memorable quest should be, or at least the elements of the classics that they believe to be most important. I'm not a game developer, and I completely admire and respect anyone who has the gumption and creativity to try and bring a vision to life. Having said that, as someone who consumes games on a regular basis, it's only natural that I judge how well a game maker has succeeded in turning their vision into a worthwhile and memorable video game quest. Piggybacking off my last couple reviews, sometimes a game bites off more than it can chew and doesn't deliver all that it could be. Sometimes a game doesn't bite off quite enough. In both cases, a game that doesn't fully realize its vision can leave a player feeling empty inside. Of course, all of this is subjective, and my opinion isn't any more or less important than anyone else. Well, it might be less important than some, really. And that brings us to the center of today's discussion. My newest review video, Beyond Galaxyland. Beyond Galaxyland was developed by Sam Enright Beats Enright, published by United Label and released on September 24th, 2024. Apparently, Sam took 5 years to fully develop this game by himself, so major props to him. Anyone who can see a project of that magnitude through to fruition deserves a round of applause, and even more so when they can deliver a good product. And guess what? Beyond Galaxyland is a very good product. I really enjoyed my time with this little game, and am of the opinion that it succeeds in many ways that a game with more acclaim and press, Sea of Stars, didn't. Is it a perfect game? No. Is it a great quest? Let me break it down for you. Beyond Galaxyland is a tale in the tradition of games like Star Ocean and other isekai-like stories where your main character is whisked away to an alien environment. Once there, he has to make sense of his new surroundings while pursuing a quest of one day returning home. I mentioned Star Ocean not only because of the similarities in story and setup, but also because Star Ocean 2 was one of the first sci-fi RPGs I'd ever played. Sci-fi RPGs have long been outnumbered by their swords and sorcery brethren. In some ways that's kind of a shame. I've always been a fan of science fiction in my RPGs. You can even argue several games in the Final Fantasy series lean more heavily into science fiction than fantasy, but there haven't been as many RPGs in general that use a science fiction setting solely as a basis for its story. But I digress. What makes Beyond Galaxyland's science fiction isekai story work is its intriguing mystery and small but likable cast of unlikely heroes. It all starts when one evening our main protagonist Doug is just hanging out with his sweetie when some real weird shit goes down. Some creepy ass spaceman appears in the middle of the night and starts chasing Doug. In a frantic effort to escape this weird ass creature / person, Doug falls into a cave with a mysterious portal. Curious and cornered by the monstrous entity, Doug approaches the portal and is transported to another world. It turns out, the other end of the portal sends him to Eros, a planet we learn that is situated in a little bubble solar system called Galaxyland, controlled by a mysterious group called Dreamcore. Doug soon learns that Dreamcore is scooping up races from dying planets and giving them refuge in their little system to protect them from a force called the End. It's also here that Doug finds out that Earth has been destroyed by the End, so he better get used to it and like it because there ain't no going home, baby. And with this intriguing premise, we are set off in an adventure to find out what the fuck is going on and how the hell we can help Dougie find out if the aliens are telling the truth that Earth is destroyed or if they're blowing smoke up his ass. The story and its execution isn't flawless, but I found this opening particularly strong and think it gives the player some nice questions to ponder. Is Earth really destroyed? Who exactly are Dreamcore and what are their intentions? Maybe they're just lying to everyone for their own nefarious desires. And what is the end? Well, you better buckle up because the game throws a player right into it. And in my opinion, this works in the game's favor. It starts really fast and never really lets up. I think my total runtime was less than 15 hours. There's not a lot of fat on this meat. It's a small, focused quest accented with fun action set pieces and cool cutscenes. Much like the last game I reviewed, it's clear this game had a limited budget and design philosophy. Unlike Redemption Reapers, however, this game's narrative knows what to focus on and knows how to deliver a story with relatable and likable characters. It's a small cast with a mix of characters very close to Doug along with some weirdo aliens who join cause, I don't know, why not? It's a science fiction game, might as well have some weirdos on your team. I especially like the interactions between Doug and his pet hamster Boomer. It seems Dreamcore has taken the liberty of giving Boomer a big anthropomorphic body and the ability to speak. The problem is, Boomer doesn't really know any language. For much of the game, Boomer has a very limited vocabulary and can only say a few words. Watching your little buddy learn to speak and express his feelings is so amusing and honestly pretty heartwarming. Boomer remains a simple creature, being a hamster and all, or guinea pig, whatever. But one thing he does know how to express is that he loves Doug. Aww, how fucking cute. Let's face it, most of our hamsters, lizards, and fish don't know who the heck we are and are most likely not capable of what we would recognize as affection. So to see a little furry buddy confirm to his owner that his whole world revolves around him, it's a really cute touch. I also really enjoyed Doug's relationship with his girlfriend from Earth, who, spoilers, also somehow was transported to Galaxyland. We find out that due to some sort of time dilation, she actually arrived in Galaxyland 2 years before Doug. While Doug is hell-bent on finding a way back home, his girlfriend is less enthusiastic. Their disagreements and the overall dialogue they share bring some real relatability to the characters. They feel like real people, which is not always easy for games to portray. And lastly, I also enjoyed Doug's interactions with the sentient robot Martybot. Built to be loyal to Dreamcore, his newfound friendship with Doug creates conflict inside the goofy little robot, and his dialogue provided me with some nice little chuckles from time to time. So overall, I liked the story, setting, and pacing. How about the presentation? Let's face it, the way a game looks and sounds is very important, no matter how good the story is. Theoretically, someone could make a game with a great story, but if the graphics and style were that of an Atari 2600 game, I don't think many people would find it appealing. Personally, I like the graphics in Beyond Galaxyland. Like the majority of indie games released these days, it's a 2D pixel-based art affair. Well, I guess the game does have a few 3D elements thrown in, but it's mostly 2D. The graphics kinda have this very specific style. They kinda remind me of Out of This World or Flashback, you know, those 16-bit adventure games on the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. I don't know how to exactly put it, but it's got like a muted color palette and like relatively simple sprite designs. It also reminds me of the pixel art in the game Children of Morta, among many others. If there is some sort of name for this sort of pixel art design, let me know, but I don't know what it's called. Maybe throw something down in the comments if you do. To be honest, when I first started playing the game, I was a bit more lukewarm on the graphics, but they grew on me the more I played. I think I really appreciate some of the cool imagery that Sam was able to pull off here. I wouldn't say that this graphical style is my favorite, but Sam's vision was really able to shine through and in the end won me over. In regards to the music, which I know Mr. Enright takes great pride in, I'd say it was enjoyable for the most part while at the same time really not being my cup of tea. It's basically futuristic sounding electro beat dance music or something. Some of it's just like kinda quirky beeps and boops with a straight techno beat behind it. I don't know. Not the sort of shit I jam out to, but you know, to each their own. Having said that, in the context of the game, it works. So we've talked about the story, we've talked about the presentation, how is the gameplay? The gameplay is surprisingly solid. Although the game mostly plays out like a classic JRPG, it also is somewhat of a 2D platformer. None of the platforming is too tricky, but there were a few spots that I had to try multiple times. There's a bit of a floaty quality to the controls, but overall it didn't feel too bad. The 2D dungeons themselves are fairly well designed with some decent puzzles, which I always think is a plus for a good quest. It's also important to mention that you can see all the enemies wandering around when you're exploring in dungeons. Striking an enemy or running into it will start a battle right there with no transition to a battle screen, which I also think works well for the game's style. In regards to the battle system, Beyond Galaxyland uses a version of the tried and true active turn-based system that classic Final Fantasy games made famous. There's also a timing-based defense mechanic, which timing-based shit seems to be all the rage these days, and I say that as an observation, not as a slight. I like timing-based shit, keeps it interesting. Battles are generally well balanced with some occasionally tricky fights while not being too difficult overall. Taking another cue from a plethora of JRPGs, the game features a monster capturing system. Once an enemy is captured, it can be used by the party for special attacks and spells. This gives the game a little more depth, as you can customize your characters by adding up to 3 monsters. Each monster will level up and learn up to 4 skills. Sadly, the monster equips don't affect stats like something like Materia did in Final Fantasy VII. It would have been cool to add that extra layer of strategy, would not? In terms of side content, there are a few side quests sprinkled about here and there on the handful of planets you visit, and the game features a photography system in which you can take pictures of every species you encounter in the game. Nice touch! The game also featured several minigames which I found to be a welcome diversion. Minigames were a staple of many of the JRPGs I played growing up, especially Final Fantasy 6 through 10, which, for good reason, is seen by many to be the golden era of Square's legendary series. So it's nice to see that influence highlighted by this modern indie developer. So, if it's not clear by now, I really enjoyed my time with Beyond Galaxyland. That's not to say it's a perfect game, and this brings me to talk about some things I think the game could have done better. I think most of my problems with the game have to do with just wanting a little more. Beyond Galaxyland is a very brief adventure, clocking in around 12 to 15 hours. Developer Sam Enright did say he aimed to make a fast-moving game with a pacing more reminiscent of a movie, and I do think he succeeded in making an engaging and well-paced adventure throughout. Having said that, after playing several shorter RPGs about this length, I think this is just a little bit too short to be considered an all-time great quest. I think the sweet spot is probably around 20 to 30 hours minimum, depending how the game is paced, obviously. And as a result of a short game, there's just not a lot of stuff in it. Now, what's there is really well done, I just wanted more. There are only 4 planets to visit, and each planet is really only what one would consider in another RPG to be a town. Each planet is basically a town and a dungeon. That's it. It works for the story, yes, but anyone expecting something like Phantasy Star 4, which actually has planets with multiple locations, will be disappointed. Now, I know I applauded the pacing in the game already, but the pacing of the story at the end seems a little off. Things seem to wrap up a bit too quickly, and I was caught off guard when I realized I was in the final dungeon. Just when it felt like the game was ramping up, it ended. Again, the pacing of the game is good for the most part in that it whisks you from place to place without much in the way of lulls. But it falls apart a little bit at the end. After all, many times figuring out how to end something in a satisfying way is the hardest part. I was also left thinking the motivation of some of the characters in the end didn't make much sense to me. That might be a me thing though, but I digress. After having said all of that, Beyond Galaxyland is a good little game. If you go into it looking for a quick, fun adventure you can blast through in a weekend, you'll definitely have a really good time. I have a lot of nostalgia for weekend video gaming. Specifically, weekend video game renting. I still remember going to the local Video King like it was yesterday. The cathartic excitement of a Friday night, trying to blast through games like Shining Force and Final Fantasy IV in a single weekend. Back then, such quest binging was a necessity, otherwise you'd run the risk of someone saving over your hard-fought save data. Even though that's no longer a concern, I still think binging Beyond Galaxyland over a short period is the way to go. Its fast pace and short length make it perfect for a weekend binge. A fun, quick, quirky sci-fi JRPG romp with enjoyable characters and weirdo aliens. It's a game that uses classic JRPG inspiration mixed with modern indie sensibilities. It's a concise but fully realized project, and in fact, I'd say it's better than another more well-known indie RPG I just reviewed on my channel. I was left wanting a little more, but others may find its brief runtime and limited game world to be a perfect snack. Overall, a good solid quest. I give Beyond Galaxyland the score of 8.6. See you later, everybody!